Rain hammered the rooftop as Ryan gripped the camera cable tighter, heart pounding like a war drum. In the glow of his garage light, sparks danced for a moment before vanishing into the wet asphalt. "Don't flinch," he whispered to himself. He-Wei was standing in the middle of his driveway at 3:27 a.m., soaked to the bone, watching a thin extension cord snake from his outdoor outlet across the bushes into her garage. For the third time this week, she thought she was slick. She thought he wouldn't notice. But Ryan did. And tonight he had a plan. Not a childish prank. Not a letter to the HOA. No. Something better. Something perfect. He reached for the small device taped under the eaves. A surge trap, DIY engineered from a retired electrician friend's blueprint. Legal? Debatable. But satisfying? He'd soon find out. As the wind howled, Ryan flipped the switch inside the breaker box. Not for the house, just the outlet. He waited. Nothing. 10 seconds passed. Then, pop. A muted thud from next door. Then, a scream. Loud. Panicked. Female. Ryan's fingers tightened around the rain-slick breaker. He didn't move, just stared across the hedges as a blue flicker lit the neighborhood like a camera flash. "Ryan!" Her voice cut through the storm. The Tesla's charging light was off, completely dead. Smoke, barely visible, wafted from under the garage frame. Then, silence. He stepped back inside. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, and was that this little revenge had just lit a fuse that would rip his quiet life to pieces. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been normal. Ryan was the quiet guy on the cul-de-sac. Early 40s, ex-IT consultant turned remote repair wizard. Liked his space, didn't cause waves. Then she moved in, Karen Beaumont, late 50s. Loud, entitled, and somehow instantly on the HOA board. Because of course she was. Wore designer yoga pants, drove a Model S, and talked about sustainability while lecturing landscapers. The first week, she knocked on Ryan's door to introduce herself. By the third week, she was warning him that his mailbox was 0.3 inches too high for regulation. Then came the noise complaints. His dog barked. Once, then the letters. Anonymous, but everyone knew. But Ryan was patient, until his electricity bill jumped. He checked the Nest logs. Something didn't add up. So he installed the cameras. And what he saw? Every other night between 2 to 4 a.m., Karen would sneak over, hoodie up, face hidden, and plug her Tesla into his outlet. Over $700 in usage. Just gone. When he confronted her in calm, professional, she said, "It's just electricity, you weren't using it anyway. No apology, no refund. Just smugness." So he waited, and planned. The night of the surge? That wasn't revenge. That was just step one. The next morning, police cars lined the curb. Ryan stood by the window sipping coffee. His hands didn't shake, but his mind raced. Karen had reported vandalism, claimed someone targeted her car, tampering, intent to harm. She was furious, loud enough for the whole block to hear. Ryan's phone buzzed. Unknown number, a voicemail. He pressed play. "You're gonna pay for this, you little worm." He exhaled slowly, not surprised. But what did surprise him was what came next. His boss, the IT firm that contracted him remotely, called hours later. Someone had reported suspicious online activity from his home IP. They were freezing his account. The video footage he had? Deleted. The cloud backup? Wiped. Karen had connections. She'd gone nuclear. Ryan spent the next week offline, reeling, unemployed, facing a potential HOA lawsuit, a criminal complaint from Karen, until he found something. In a box his dad left behind before he passed. B. Locked file marked Beaumont Realty. 99. Ryan opened it, and the blood drained from his face. Inside were dozens of black and white documents, old property transfers, fraudulent ones, loans taken out under names that didn't exist, all tied to a man named Charles Beaumont, Karen's ex-husband, and Ryan's father had once worked for him. Before turning whistleblower, Karen's name wasn't on the papers, but her signature was, dozens of times. Ryan had found something much bigger than electricity theft. He had leverage, but what he didn't expect was who showed up at his door. Next, it was midnight when the knock came. Not Karen, her son, mid-30s, pale, nervous, holding a manila envelope. "I need to talk," he whispered. "You're not the only one she's ruined." Ryan let him in. The son, Marcus, revealed everything. Karen hadn't just scammed Ryan. She'd framed neighbors, sued widows, buried fines in paperwork so deep they'd lose their homes. She'd built her wealth on secrets and manipulation. But worst of all, the Tesla. It wasn't hers. It was Marcus's. He'd left it in her garage while overseas. She'd been using his car and Ryan's power, without either of them knowing. Ryan stared at him. "So, what do we do?" Marcus opened the envelope. "Photos, bank records, court affidavits. She's been stealing from the HOA for years," he said. "I've been building a case, but I need a trigger, something public." Ryan nodded slowly. "I have an idea." The annual HOA meeting was packed. Every resident was there. Karen, front and center, wearing pearls and that smug smile. Ryan stood up, plugged in his laptop. No preamble, just hit play. The projector lit up. Surveillance footage of Karen, stealing power. Frame by frame, then overlays of her signature on old fraud documents. Then a video of Marcus standing in front of his burned Tesla explaining everything. The room erupted. Karen's voice cracked as she shouted denials, called fake, blamed hackers, but the final nail? A notarized statement from her ex-husband, now a hospice patient, confirming it all. Police arrived minutes later, not just for petty theft, for felony fraud. Ryan's name was cleared. His contract was reinstated. And Karen, gone. She never came back to the neighborhood, but Ryan didn't celebrate. He sat on his porch that night watching rain roll down the driveway. Marcus joined him, said nothing for a long time, then asked, "Why? Didn't you just let it go?" Ryan didn't answer at first, then, "Because silence lets people like her win." The rain fell harder, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled. But Ryan felt peace for the first time in years. The scream was still ringing in Ryan's ears as he closed the breaker box and stepped back into his garage. For a moment, the night was still. No sirens, no voices, just the quiet hiss of rain against the gutters and the steady thump of his heart in his chest. He wasn't proud of what he'd done. Not exactly. But he wasn't sorry either. Karen had stolen from him, for weeks, mocked him, gaslit him, laughed in his face. Tonight she learned there were consequences. But the war, it had just begun. The next morning, Ryan didn't leave the house. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, as a tow truck hauled Karen's Tesla away. She paced her driveway barefoot in a bathrobe, yelling into her phone. Police came, then left. No one knocked on his door, for now. By sunset, Ryan had 3 voicemails, one from the HOA, one from his landlord, one from an unknown number. He only played the last. "You're gonna regret this, I don't lose." It was her voice. Low, venomous, smug. But what got to him wasn't the threat. It was the calm. She wasn't panicked. She was planning. That night, the lights in Ryan's house flickered, then went out. He stepped outside. The whole block was lit, except for him. Someone had shut off his power from the external panel. His lock had been clipped. He sprinted around the side of the house and stopped dead. The outdoor camera he'd mounted last week, gone. Just a crack in the wall and a few dangling wires. Ryan swore under his breath. This was getting personal. Fast. The next morning, a letter arrived, hand-delivered, HOA envelope, a formal notice, unapproved electrical modifications, a $3,200 fine. He flipped the paper over, written in pen. "Next time, don't play with fire." Karen had found out about the surge trap, and now she was coming for blood. He needed leverage, something real, something that couldn't be erased or denied. So, he went digging. Karen had only been on the board for 6 months, but she'd already filed over 20 property violation claims, most of them against elderly residents. Several had moved. At least one had declared bankruptcy after mysterious fees wiped their savings. Ryan pulled records, bank statements, signatures, and something clicked. One name showed up again and again on the approvals: Charles Beaumont. At first, he thought it was her husband, but Charles Beaumont died in 2003. Ryan knew that name, knew it too well. He opened the old safe in the attic, the one his dad left behind. Inside, old newspaper clippings, court records, business filings. And there it was. Charles Beaumont wasn't just Karen's ex-husband. He was a convicted white-collar fraudster, and Ryan's father had once worked for him as an analyst the year before the company collapsed. Ryan's hands started to shake. What if Karen had picked this neighborhood on purpose? What if she knew exactly who Ryan was? This wasn't just a turf war, it was a vendetta. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. Every creak felt like a threat. At 2:13 a.m., motion sensors blinked on his phone. Garage camera, backyard, side gate. Someone was moving around his property. He grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, barefoot. No sign of anyone, until he turned toward the porch and saw it, a dead bird pinned to the screen door with a screwdriver. A note under its wing: "Keep digging. I dare you." By morning, Ryan's mind was spiraling. He sat at his computer, piecing together the fragments of Karen's life. Found her maiden name. Traced her business filings. Buried deep in corporate archives, he discovered a company name: Glenmar Holdings. Registered. In her name, but the tax filings, dirty, incomplete, full of shell transfers. He wasn't the only one she'd been stealing from. She'd turned HOA dues into a personal slush fund, laundering money through landscaping contracts and fake repair. Bids every neighbor she find. She profited, but Ryan needed proof, so he did something dangerous. He called her son Marcus. They met at a diner 2 towns over. Marcus was in his mid-30s, nervous, looked like a guy who hadn't slept in weeks. "You're Ryan?" He nodded. "She's out of control," Marcus said. "I've tried to stop her before, but she doesn't leave survivors." Ryan slid a folder across the table. "Documents, screenshots, maps. This is what I've got. I think she's still laundering money, maybe worse." Marcus didn't blink, then he pulled out a flash drive. "You're right, and I can prove it." The drive contained 3 things: a full export of Glenmar Holdings' internal emails. 3. Financial ledger showing over $300,000 misappropriated from HOA funds. 5. Audio. A recorded phone call. Karen's voice, bragging about gutting the sheep on Sycamore Lane and frying some little bastard's car just to watch him twitch. Ix. That little bastard's ass was Ryan. He stared at Marcus. "She knows who I am, doesn't she?" Marcus nodded. "She's hated your dad for 20 years. She blamed him for Charles getting locked up, and when she found out you lived here, it was only a matter of time." Ryan exhaled. The air felt heavy in his lungs. "So what now?" Marcus leaned in. "We burn her down." Ryan stared at the USB in his palm. It felt heavier than it should, like holding a live grenade with the pin halfway out. Across from him, Marcus looked dead serious, pale, determined. The kind of resolve that only comes from years of watching. "Someone destroy everything you care about. You ready to go public?" Ryan asked. Marcus nodded. "She's not just a fraud, she's a criminal in pearls, and she's running out of time." They didn't go to the police, not yet. They knew how deep Karen's roots ran. Her sister worked in city zoning. Her cousin was on the county ethics board. If they went through official channels, it'd be buried before it reached a courtroom. So they went louder. They launched a website, anonymous, clean, titled simply HoFraudExposed.com. Ryan uploaded everything: financial records, audio clips, side-by-side comparisons of Karen's signatures on fake bids, even the Tesla footage. They shared it on Reddit. Next door, A carefully placed tip to a local journalist with a reputation for hating HOAs. By noon the next day, it exploded. Karen showed up at Ryan's house the next morning. No more passive aggression. No more veiled threats. She was furious. Sunglasses, trench coat, shaking with rage. "You've crossed the line," she spat. "You think you can hide behind a website? You're finished." Ryan didn't blink. "You stole from everyone on this street. You framed me. You threatened me. And you used your own son's car to commit a crime." Karen's mouth twitched, a flicker of something. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. "You don't know who you're messing with," she hissed. Then, "You think Marcus is clean? He was part of it until he wasn't. You're just his new puppet." Ryan's jaw clenched. "She's lying," Marcus said from behind her. Calm. Collected. Karen froze. She hadn't seen him step out of Ryan's house. She turned. "Eyes wide, he cut her off. "Mom, I have the transfer receipts. You forged my name. You used me. You ruined Dad. You're done." Her hand trembled. For a moment, she looked like a scared old woman. Then her mask snapped back on. "You're both dead to me." She stormed off. Tires screeched out of the driveway. Ryan turned to Marcus. "She's going to run." Marcus nodded. "Let her, the IRS won't." The next 72 hours were chaos. The story hit local news, then regional, then national. HOA Queenpin, accused of embezzling $300K from residents. Karen's face plastered on every screen, security footage, screen grabs of her Tesla smoking in the rain, voice clips where she mocked retirees and bragged about turning fines into vacation money. Neighbors began coming forward. A retired veteran, a widowed school teacher, a single dad evicted over a fence color violation. It all fit. She hadn't just exploited the system. She'd become the system and used it like a weapon. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Hidden file on the USB, buried under layers of junk metadata. A scanned letter, signed by Charles Beaumont just before his death. It was a confession, detailing not only Karen's fraud, but a string of offshore accounts, hush payments, and even bribery related to the original lawsuit that took him down. And in the final paragraph, a name, Thomas Grayson, Ryan's father, and beside it, in Charles's handwriting, "He warned me, told me to come clean." I didn't listen. Karen made sure of it. "I only hope his son doesn't suffer for our sins." Ryan read it a dozen times. The man who destroyed his father's life had tried to make it right before he died. But Karen had buried it, until now. It took weeks, but the dominoes fell. Karen was arrested, not just for HOA fraud, but for federal-level wire fraud, obstruction, and tax evasion. Multiple neighbors filed civil suits. Marcus testified against her. So did Ryan. And when it was all over, Karen was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. She didn't look smug at the sentencing. She looked tired, hollow, like a mask that had finally cracked. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA board was dissolved. Residents voted for a new open council. No more secret fines, no more rigged inspections. Ryan, he was offered the position of president. He turned it down. "I just want to fix computers," he smiled. "Not people." But the neighbors never forgot. They still leave baked goods on his porch, still say thank you when they pass him on the sidewalk. And Marcus, he sold the Tesla, bought a pickup, took a job teaching coding to kids in underfunded schools. One night, months later, Ryan and Marcus sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the trees. "Do you think she ever really cared about anyone?" Marcus asked. Ryan didn't answer at first. Then, "I think she cared about control. Some people mistake that for love." They sat in silence. Then Marcus asked, "Do you think we're the bad guys now? I mean, we destroyed her." Ryan shook, his head slowly. "No, she destroyed herself. We just turned the lights on."